Sometimes it's more about, the presentation is every line. One thing I would say in your first couple weeks is get to the contract classes.
I've been doing some of those, yeah, for
Good,
sure.
good. That's awesome. It's nice to meet you and welcome.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you, and it's exciting. So literally you picked a career where everybody is your client.
Yeah, and I picked a good brokerage to be with because everybody is very helpful.
You don't always get that.
No, and then that's I was told that, yeah, so I'm pretty happy with Keller Williams.
That's awesome. I went to, I'm a slow learner. I went to another brokerage and they handed me a contract and said, go get business. It's like, all right. So it's been interesting. We'll give everybody a couple minutes, but so as we always start, Ignite, welcome everybody. I know everybody enjoyed their week off from Ignite and going to family reunion and getting mind blown for the week. Right. So today we're going to start with check-ins. And as we start, we will get started on this, and I'll let people go through as I keep adding them. But seeing as though we're going to go through the contacts, notes, and appointments. And that's how we keep track of everything. Why? These are the things that are important. 7 appointments a week leads you to $1 million, right? MREA. Anyway, so I'm going to start with checking in. And Tyler.
Yeah, sure. I actually just got done with my first buyer's appointment, so that was pretty cool. Went pretty well. I've been keeping up with lots of contacts and stuff like that. The buyer's appointment, yeah, it went pretty well. She is looking to buy a manufactured home sometime soon. Her motivation was a little bit hard to get at, but I think she liked me, so that's good. And I sent her some information and stuff, and I'm not really sure. I think I maybe should have been more forward about like forms and stuff, but she seemed kind of hesitant at first, so I was kind of just getting a feel for her. And yeah, all in all, for the first one, I was pretty happy with how it went.
I was gonna say mirror match is always positive.
Mm-hmm.
If you get pushy and they're not, then that's not going to work well. So
Yeah.
How many contacts did you make?
Oh, contacts. Today I haven't made any outside of talking to her. But
Okay.
over the past week, probably 30 or 40.
Okay.
Making a lot of calls.
I was gonna say, how many notes? Any notes?
No, I haven't sent out any notes.
Okay. Perfect. And then we're gonna go notes. And Elizabeth, since we were talking, you want to chime in with contacts, notes, and appointments? I know we had a week full of learning and whatnot, but the important part is we still do the basics of real estate, right?
Yeah, so I have had no appointments. I do have a friend back home that is looking for land between Bend and La Pine. So I reached out to him yesterday because he finally has power again. And I had sent him some properties through MLS. And then I also shared my app with him yesterday.
Oh, very cool. How's adding to your database going?
So I did the initial ad, and then honestly, since then, I haven't added anymore.
Okay. Well, I think the big thing is setting it up and organizing it. Once you do the big ad, that can be overwhelming. Not only that, you can add your Facebook friends and all of that. So perfect. Chelsea.
Hello.
Hi.
Over the last week, I have been, I signed up for the conference, so I've been watching videos and going through the classes. I also have just been crazy signing up for classes and just really trying to educate myself. So I've been doing like the land classes, anything that a lot of the escrow offices are sending my way that I can do, I'm trying to sign up for. So I've just been really trying to educate myself, reading my Gary Keller. I listen to that on audio every morning. Also, I'm still working with my first time home buyers. My house that should be coming up for sale, but they have decided to wait until summer for sure. That's the one in Dallas. So that's going to be a while out. And then my current buyers who have a limit like right under 700,000, we have been going and seeing all sorts of properties and battling that one. So yeah, I think I shall get a good tour of the area by the time I'm done finding a home for them. And 10 note cards, just doing the regular stuff that I've been doing for my clients, and getting a good dose of new agent reality in a buyer's market on a property that your clients potentially may really love, and getting the boot out of that. So learning some valuable lessons this last week on how fast things go and how little care there really is into, I guess, pleasing, people. I did get a good lesson, and I will say this because this is just a short little experience, but I learned a harsh lesson on a house that came up for sale. And I had no idea this was even a thing, but my client sent it to me. They had found it first, and I said, okay, let's see it. It was kind of like later in the day. They both had to work. Messaged the agent for an appointment, and she got back to me and said, it's open, like go see it whenever. And I said, okay, great. Tomorrow at 4, we'll be there. And because I always like to give a time just so they know, I usually send something after saying thanks for viewing, just real quick. And then the day before we go, I always review the listing again, double check, read, go through so I know what I'm talking about. And I see it at 2:30 and we're supposed to view it at 4. And there's a new note in there that now says all offers due by 4 p.m. today. That was not there previously. And that's when we were supposed to be viewing it. So I called the agent to say, hey, I'm really sorry. I just saw this. I don't know if I missed it. I'm new, so I may have screwed up. I like to use the new agent card because I don't know everything and it could very well have been my fault. And they said, oh no, I've just been really overwhelmed. I had no idea how much action I would have. I just put it on there. And I said, okay, well, I talked to you yesterday. I have a 4 o'clock showing today. Can I still make this happen? I would get you an offer right away. It's well lower than their budget. I know they're willing to go way over. Is it possible? And she said, absolutely not. No way. I'm completely unwilling to do that. 4 p.m. is the last. And then she kind of bit off my head and said, well, I don't understand why all these people are calling me to make appointments when it's vacant. And I said, well, again, I'm really new. There's the box in the corner. And I was looking at it so I could read it to her. I said, I'm so sorry. It says it's occupied, like owner occupied, but then it says vacant, but then it says 24-hour lockbox. And I read her the whole thing and she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. That's my fault. We've entered it wrong. I don't know. Now I know why all these people are calling me for appointments. And anyways, it was just really harsh reality. And I felt really upset about it for a couple of days. Like I lost out on like this great home for my clients, but luckily they totally understood. So yeah, learned a tough lesson on that one, but it was very interesting. And my new agent card didn't work very well, but anyways, they go fast. That's all. That's all.
It sounds like you did some educating on her side too, right?
I mean, she did say like that is up there wrong. I don't think she had entered that. Maybe she had someone do it for her, an assistant or something, but she was like, she apologized to me at the end of the conversation because she did say it was in there incorrectly, and whatever. But anyways, it was just kind of disappointing because I've never seen that before, that they would just change it kind of last minute and cut it off. But to me, it sounded like she said, we have 3 solid offers. We're just going to choose from what we already have. We don't care to have anyone else see the house, basically. And so it was a good lesson to learn. So it's unfortunate though, for the people who are buying, because it's kind of like not everyone can take their day off of work or leave their job to go see a home if you're going to cut it off. And there was like no previous times on it. Like she just kind of popped it up there. So
I will tell you this, from what it sounds like, you didn't do anything wrong. If she's got appointments scheduled as a listing agent, and I'm not going to bash a listing agent and whatnot, ultimately it's her seller's choice. But if you have appointments going in and they were scheduled the day before, as a fiduciary to your sellers, would it be in your best interest or your seller's best interest, in order to get the highest price the market will bear in the shortest amount of time, to have those appointments that are scheduled?
Well, and I asked her too. I was very specific in saying this is lower than their limit. It is what they're looking for. They are very aware that they have to go over in this market. And it didn't sound to me like she had like crazy over offers. It just sounded like they wanted to be done with it. Like they were just done. They had their offers. They were good to go and they weren't interested in getting more, even if they were higher. So
And the house was vacant?
yes. I don't know. It was weird. It seemed like something else was going on, but I had to go with her and what she said. But yeah, it was unfortunate. It was definitely a learning lesson. So I will know for next time. Don't wait.
Well, and that's okay. And really it's about scheduling it, right? That's where showing time comes in and all of that good stuff. So really you didn't do anything wrong. So
It sounds
great
like
job, good experience. Thanks for sharing. How many contacts did you get this last week? I know we were all educating ourselves, right?
Yeah, so I made lots of contacts. I would only say about like five to 10 contacts total. My Instagram's growing 5 to 10 people a day, and I've had a few conversations. I'm also kind of big on connecting with other people that I've known in the past that are realtors as well. So I'm making a point to do that like through my social media. And so I've had probably 3 new realtor contacts in the Salem area. So
Good. Zoe.
Hi.
Hi.
We've had I think 8 or 9 new contacts, and we've got 6 new people in command. And we have 3 appointments. We did one today. We have one on this coming Friday, and we had one last Friday. We were in the family reunion all last week, so it was kind of crazy following along with all that stuff, but we still managed to have our first official Zoom buyer appointment, and we got our buyer packet together, which was pretty exciting, all branded and everything like that. So that part is moving along, but that's about it so far. Oh, and we messed up our business cards. So anybody that took note of our lovely picture I showed off last time, forget all about that one. We got the wrong email address.
that's what happens when you buy like 10 URLs, because you're thinking 5 years, 10 years into the future. And then you start throwing it all together, and then you are so focused on a color scheme, you don't look really closely at that email address.
We directed it to a URL we don't own. But it was a variation of one that we own. So luckily nobody else owned it, didn't go anywhere else. But we bought 500. So we are now waiting for Vistaprint to send our next batch to us, and it's gotten stuck in the snow somewhere. So we are not able to send any cards right now, because we wanted to send thank you cards with our business card. And so we've been holding off a couple of days, but we picked up some, is it allowed to give beer to clients? Like as gifts? We get wine and stuff from people. Is that cool?
All the time.
Oh, good, because we bought some beer for a client. We haven't given it to them yet. We wanted to make sure. But that's it.
Well, and how many people give wine for housewarming or, in their basket and whatnot. So I think that's great. If they're a beer drinker, I mean, you can cater it to
Good.
them, right? So
That's what I was thinking. But I came from a research background that was federally funded grant money, and they're really weird about, like you can't serve alcohol or buy alcohol with that money. So I've kind of stuck in that, like, is it okay? Am I allowed
I think
to
the
give beer?
limit, I believe it's $25, $50 for your closing gifts. I know a lot of realtors go over that. But as far
That
as
is good to know. I
taxes,
didn't know there was a dollar limit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the key there is not giving it to them before you're having them sign a contract.
there you go. Good. Yes.
That's a great point. We actually haven't given them the contract yet. We're friends with them. I'm pretty confident they'll sign with us, but that, we'll definitely lord some beer over their heads to make sure that signature comes in.
No, that's what you don't want to do. It's not a bargain. It's not a negotiating chip, right?
Right.
But if it
Well, that's
comes with
good.
good intention and thank you for choosing us, then here you go, right?
Yeah, we had a really great conversation and their new parents. And so we just bought a couple of inexpensive local, really good beers to give them as a thank you. So
Very cool. And let's see. And Jeff, you're on the same plane. Got it. Stephanie.
Hey there.
Hey.
So I've had 7.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. So also along with the family reunion last week, I made 7 contacts. 3 of those being brand new, so the other ones just kind of repeat. I've added an additional 11 people to my database and have written 10 note cards that will go in the mail today. No new appointments. I did follow up with my 3 buyers. I talked to the lender of one of my buyers to see where we're at on the pre-qualification process, and also followed up with a listing lead that I have. I did preview 2 vacant homes for one of my buyers. And then the other thing I've been working on is just my social media. So I did my first video last week for my Feature Business Friday series I did. And between the YouTube and Facebook platform, I have over 800 views. So just trying to figure out how I can leverage that a little bit. You know, the idea behind it is really to just get my name out there, get more people to like my page. So just trying to look into some of the webinars on the Facebook ads and things like that, just to see how I can leverage that a little bit more.
Okay, perfect. You're doing all the right things. Way to go. Greg, Brady.
Yes, I apologize for being a minute behind too.
No, you're absolutely fine.
So last week was my first really full week, I guess.
Okay.
So I've really just been kind of getting everything up to speed, getting my contacts into command, getting my systems set up, getting training set up, and attending family reunion. So
I have a question.
sure.
Did you start last week with a full head of hair?
I did. You too?
I did too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it has been a little overwhelming, but also like a really great week to start. Like a little overwhelming, but I feel like I would have missed out on a ton had I started this week and not had the opportunity to do family reunion. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. So welcome. I think that's amazing. Thank you for being here. What we're talking about, what we talk about in the check-ins and all of this is the essential part of your business on a daily basis. The most important thing you can do is have conversations and add to your database. Database management allows you to be in front of people when you're not in front of them. Okay. So it's very key to have that aspect of your business.
Yeah.
And then it's about lead gen and getting in front of those people and calling them and checking in on them. Okay. We've had a lot of chances with the ice and the snow, at least up here in Hillsborough, to check on people, you know.
Yeah.
What were things that you could possibly do, right? And that would be, I had people that were without power for 9 days. They just got it on, so I had an extra generator. Hey, do you need it? I'll bring it to you. You know, type of things. How can we help people? Stay in front of them, right? And so I would say, welcome aboard, and learn lots, right? Jump in and take it all, right?
Awesome.
Debbie.
Well, last week I dealt with down trees and electricity issues. So it wasn't a super productive real estate week, but I did make a point to send out notes last week. That was mostly what I did. And then this morning I started back up on cold calls.
Very cool.
So I have 3 new contacts from today and I have 3 notes ready to go out.
Perfect. Sounds great. And hopefully you didn't have too much damage at the property and whatnot. So very well. Alicia. Oh, she said just a second. All right. So as we know, so she will come back to us.
Anytime.
There
Sorry,
she is.
I'm here. I'm in an office, so I'm on my headset.
Okay.
what did I do this last week? I did Ignite all week. And then I have a buyer that I'm working with. I made 2 lender contacts. So I have an appointment following up. We're going to have lunch this Wednesday. What else? I forgot to write all this down. I've been doing so many things. Yeah, I think that's my big highlight, is just like being in the office for Ignite and, connecting with new agents that have been around. The lender contacts, that was great because I don't get a lot of that. I now have another title escrow that I need to reach out to. So that's kind of what I spent last week diving into.
Very cool. Yeah. And it's all about those relationships. If I can teach you guys any one thing, it's finding those relationships. One of the first things I did totally by accident when I got into the business was I had somebody come to an open house who was, her lender was from Chase Bank. And so we worked together. And once we worked together, we had a great transaction from start to finish. I met him for coffee when it was all said and done. He since moved on from Chase Bank, but he's been a absolute a great partner, a reciprocal business, and sending business my way just because of the business we had. So if you hit those banks, Chase, Wells Fargo, US, they all have people walking in looking to buy through their programs, and they're just waiting for realtors. So that's an excellent opportunity to get in front of people and build that reciprocal relationship. But without further ado, I'm going to jump in. One, I'm Matt, and thank you for being here. I know after last week, it's really tough to get back in. First, I want to make sure that I did get everybody, that everybody did update me and roll and whatnot. Today's class I'm excited for is make and receive offers, especially in this complex market that we're in. So the first thing that I want to do here is I'm going to I'm going to make you the host, Amanda. And so I'm going to introduce Amanda Switzer. She joined Keller Williams E&S as a new solo agent in 2012. She was top 20% in 2019 for office production. Amanda has earned a spot on the ALC since 2019. She's passionate about building wealth through real estate, not only for herself and her clients, but also our KWRES agents as well. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I guess now that we're the whole network, I would add not just in Eugene Springfield, but I love teaching these classes. It's a big part of my personal mission to spread wealth. And I think real estate, especially in markets like this, is the #1 way to do it.
I think that's amazing. I think you're no better time to buy, right? Get that investment.
Exactly.
So without further ado, I want to make sure you can screen share.
Oh, let's see. It looks like I have the option. So,
Okay.
Yep, we should be good.
Okay, so I will hang on for 5, 10, 15 minutes just to kind of make sure everything's going well, and then I will let you go and teach. So without further ado, Amanda, take it away. It's all yours.
All right, thank you guys. I will preface this with probably just like a lot of Ignite teachers, I do not have a ton of experience teaching on Zoom yet. So forgive me if I have any hiccups. And then I do take notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm checking my notes to make sure I've got the information correct to what you're referencing. And if you have any questions pop up, I find the easiest way in Zoom is just to put them in the chat box and I will get to them. And yeah, I hope you guys learn a lot. And to start out, so just like with every Ignite session, hopefully so far, we're going to start out with a little affirmation. It's one of my favorite things. One of the first Zoom conferences I went to was a Tony Robbins, and I love how he can bring the energy up in a crowd. And I know one of his go-to things, in addition to multiple other things, is affirmations and movement. And in my market center, I also am the chair of the wellness committee, so that plays right in. So I'm going to have you all, if you're in a space where you can, get up, get moving throughout the class today. If you start to feel your energy shift down, or if you're just feeling like you've been sitting for a week on conference calls for a family reunion, I encourage you to get up, turn your camera off if you want to, if you don't want to be distracting, or if you want us to see your yoga moves, that's fine too. But we're going to start out with our affirmation for the day, which is, I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call. So we'll go ahead and say it together. The last Zoom class I did, everyone did their own, 12 people just said it right after another. I'll let you guys choose what you want to do. But go ahead and take your microphone off, and we'll do, I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call for the affirmation. I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call. I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call.
Enjoy helping people and welcome my call.
Excellent. Do we need to jump around a little? I think we need to jump a little. Just a couple little jumps, and then we'll lead generate, which I know is the next favorite thing to do. All right. I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call.
I enjoy helping people and they welcome my call.
You guys are great. Okay. Anyone else want to do it? All right. Okay. I know you did it. You were just on silent. So the next session of our class is, of course, practicing what we've been learning. So I know you guys have been practicing scripts through the last Ignite classes. If this happens to be your first class, just reference what's in your binder. And you should be practicing your scripts daily. Some of the classes have you practice them together in class. And either way, like Matt said, script practice should be a part of your work that you do every day. The most important part about that is just that you don't want to be practicing on your clients. That's a very expensive way to learn how to do scripts correctly. It's the most expensive way. So you want to practice as much as you can in comfortable, safe settings like this. I know with the Eugene Market Center, we have script practice pretty consistently in the morning, and it's very rare that you can't coerce another KW agent to practice scripts with you. Yeah.
Shameless plug.
Oh, there you go.
Shameless plug. I teach scripts every morning, Tuesday through Friday, 8:20 in the morning. The link goes out through your market center on the ASD website, or the information of what's coming up. So every Tuesday through Friday, I do teach it. We have love to see more people, but it's great to get involved.
Yep. Well, and a lot of people, when I led an expansion team within my market center, and one of the main things that I think people get from joining teams is learning scripts really well at a high level from people who have a lot of experience. And so our market centers offer that without paying any commission splits. You just get to learn. And so definitely plug into that. Okay. Well, and then this setup here assumes you have practiced your scripts today, and we're going to prospect for about 15 minutes, asking for referrals, asking for appointments, or just asking for the opportunity to connect with people. I know most of you said you were new. And one of the things that I always like to do when I was starting out, and honestly, I'll still go back through, if I find that I'm just not talking to a lot of people that are ready to do something, I'll just start making contacts, set coffee dates, Zoom coffee dates. They're the easiest thing ever. And then say, hey, I'm just launching my business and I'd like to just chat with you a little bit about what your real estate experiences have been. Learn from them about what they loved about agents they've worked with. If they haven't worked with an agent, then maybe you have a great opportunity to be their go-to. And I know you have some scripts for that in your Ignite. So as you're making your calls or your text or your social media contacts, again, you want to, for contacts, you want to have that exchange. So if you're doing text or social media, you want to count it as a contact if you're getting a response. And then if you set an appointment or get a referral, go ahead and post it up in the chat box. We would do a cowbell if we were in class, but that's a little distracting with the audio. So I'm going to set a timer here, and we'll do 15 minutes of calls. So we'll have you back off the phone at about 1:45. And while you're doing that, I'm going to practice screen sharing.
And I'm going to leave my Zoom room number in. So if you guys want to add it to your calendar, I would encourage all of you to hit Scripps classes Tuesday through Fridays. We usually go Spire.
8:20.
What's that?
You said at 8:20?
8:20 to about 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Nice.
We usually go over because we also, if you have anything coming up or if you need questions or anything, we usually do Scripps to about 8:50, 8:20 to 8:50, and then 10 minutes of, hey, how can I help you in your business?
Awesome.
Awesome bonus. Okay. And that's 526-049-8196. There's my shameless plug, but I appreciate all the efforts on Scripps because I enjoy running it because it actually gets you better.
Oh,
at having
absolutely.
those conversations.
And as a new agent, and honestly, I find even, I've been doing this since 2012. I found it to be one of the most helpful things that I've done because just getting comfortable having conversations with people is going to help you lead them to the right decision.
Absolutely.
The better you can help them self-discover the right choices, especially in this market. We're under a lot of stress to help advise buyers the best offer when some houses are truly going for over market value. So being confident in those Scripts is essential.
Essential, and tempering the expectations. It used to be if somebody was looking at 500,000, we would look up to 510, 515 and see if there was some wiggle room based on time on the market. Now we're looking at, I'm looking between 450 and 475 and praying it doesn't go over 500, right?
Yep.
So that's a good thing. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to make a couple calls. If you have anything, do you have my number if you need anything?
I don't. You want to put that into the chat?
Yep. And this is for anybody else. If you have any questions or anything like that, I'm always happy to answer questions. It's a passion.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you. Like I said, if you need anything, let me know, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. And I think we had a new person jump on. So unless that was someone who was re-logging in, we're practicing. Well, we're not practicing. We're lead generating for business until about 1:45. If you have any questions or if you get any appointments set in this time, go ahead and put them in the chat box. Noticing a couple of familiar faces out there. It's good to see you all. Let's see. Good job making your calls and contacts. Remember, also part of this lead generation time is writing note cards. So if you have made contact with anyone or have any thank you cards to send out, now's a good time to start prepping those. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. Got about 2 minutes. All right, y'all. It has been 15 minutes. You just put in 15 solid minutes of working towards growing your business. I'm proud of you all. I didn't see any comments in the chat about appointments set, but if anyone set any appointments, definitely go ahead and just give yourself a little moment of victory. And of course, if anyone had any questions as they went through their calls today, be sure to share them with the group, and we can chat about anything that held you up. But if you can master this lead generation time, you will have a successful real estate career. The name of the game is contacts. You cannot sell any houses without talking to people and asking the right questions at the right time. All right. Well, and then the most important part of that process. So you've been prospecting, lead generating just now, and I know you've been learning about those steps through the process. And now is where we really get into the heart of why those calls are helpful. You've learned how to show your buyers homes, set the stage for having a great listing appointment, and you've already had your appointments. And now our class is about getting your offers accepted, which I think is one of the most critical pieces in our current market, and is even harder than setting appointments. When I started, it was definitely, where am I going to find my leads? Now, even if you have leads, you really have to be a master of walking your clients through this process of offering on properties if they're the buyer, receiving offers if they're the seller. We heard today, in the accounting there, of how stressful it can be for a buyer's agent if a listing agent isn't handling that process very well. And trust me, on both sides, there's a lot of room for mistakes. So let's see. So buyer conversations during the prospecting time, that want to be a little careful about that. Asking for referrals definitely qualifies as that prospecting time. And I think I stretch the rules a little bit in that I allow myself one contact per active client to go into my lead generation time as far as what I'm tracking. But great job picking up the phone. A lot of times that's where you have to start. Call that person that you know is going to pick up, you're going to have a good conversation with, and then roll from there. Great callers. Promise to referral option. Excellent, excellent. Perfect. So building that relationship from prospecting circles. All right, you guys, you ready to learn about making offers? Give me a thumbs up. You guys said I like a little engagement. All right, awesome. And can you guys see my screen? You should see the lead gen. Can you see my whole screen, or can you just see the lead generating PowerPoint?
It'll just be the lead gen PowerPoint.
Perfect. All right. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop yourself off mute. I find this class actually goes pretty fast, so I would suspect we'll be done before 4, even if you all have a good amount of questions. If I'm in the middle of a sentence, you can always pop a note in the chat box so that I remember to come back to it, whatever you're comfortable with, but I will address questions as they come up. I found that this particular agenda is pretty all-inclusive, so you should get a lot out of today. Let's see if I can. All right, getting your head in the game. Offer, the process of moving a buyer from seller agreement to a sales contract. So this is where you can really start to think about counting your clients as a potential paycheck. I love opportunities that it allows you to kind of start to track that in that process. So the offer process. So on the buying side, you make an offer on a property after you've shown it. The seller will have 3 options for every offer received. They can counter the offer, which leads you to more negotiations. They can accept the offer, which begins your contract to close process, or they can reject the offer. The buyer agent contacts the listing agent to learn more. Don't assume no means no. In multiple offers, you're not likely to get a counter offer. I'm sure across the network, we're experiencing the same tight market. I think just Grants Pass is really having maybe a little different fluctuation. And market to market, you may run into houses that you won't have multiple offers, but for the most part, you're safe to advise clients to offer as if there's going to be multiple offers. And of course, that's going to change market to market, year to year. Every year in real estate is totally different. Season to season, things can change, neighborhood to neighborhood, and then also with the condition of the property. So that's the buyer process. And then the seller, of course, has the option to respond any of those 3 ways. So even if there is a multiple offer situation, the seller could choose to counter an offer. They could just reject offers, or they could accept the offer. I would say on both sides, you really want to secure the best bet for your client. So on the buying side, if you get a rejection, you definitely want to have that conversation with the listing agent to say, okay, what is that really it? Did they accept something else? Did they offer a backup position to anyone? I've had several buyers that have gotten a rejection, and then we either let the listing agent know that we wanted to be in backup and they decided not to, or that we were in backup. And with our COVID times, buyers are not always very secure. We could have 10 offers on the table and only 2 have a pre-approval, which still blows my mind, but it happens. I've been the listing agent in that kind of situation. And then on the other side, for buyers, the seller may want to have secure, they may have an offer on the table for something else. And so if the listing agent didn't think to offer backup initially, that could make a big difference. But just setting that stage for that continued conversation is really essential. All right. And then in your packet, of course, it talks about the different aspects. I'm not going to read through letter to letter the packet that you have, but be sure to kind of watch through for key points, and there will be additional information in here. So we're going to start out with representing the buyer. So preparing to write a great offer. It can be helpful to create a checklist for preparing that offer so that you stay on track and don't miss any opportunities to help them. In writing the offer, that's going to help you also have a checklist or a reference for what's critical. And that's where it's going to be really important to be really familiar with those contracts. With the market being so tight, I personally try to work with buyer's agents as much as time allows, but there are listing agents out there that if there's a typo if a section is missed, if they can tell that that offer wasn't written in a super professional, thorough manner, they will send it back with red highlights. They will just flat out reject it or advise their client to reject it. And so being really mindful of those details can be essential. So even if you've gotten the client to write the perfect offer, just know sometimes that's not enough. And having those checklists and really knowing what you're doing as far as putting the offer together can help. And I know through the Ignite, the coaching programs, you've always got someone there who will look over an offer if you've got any questions. And then presenting the offer to the listing agent. So having that conversation in advance. Oftentimes listing agents are bombarded with questions about all sorts of things, from things that they've already written in the showing notes to how motivated their sellers are, to details that you would never guess the buyer's agent might share. And so if you do get a quick response or a sharp response, or someone who seems maybe offended when it doesn't seem like that's relevant, just be mindful of this is stressful from all sides of the spectrum. For a lot of listing agents, they maybe get 3 listings a year, so they might not have that experience. And then you might have other listing agents who they list 100 homes a year, and that can be, you know, the opposite side of that spectrum. So being really mindful in those conversations. And again, coming back to those scripts, being very well scripted in what to say, and being really just listening more than you're talking.
Amanda, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You said that as a listing agent, you'll have buyers actually saying, how motivated is your seller? Isn't that like completely off of the whole ethics thing? You're not supposed to represent your seller and say, they're really motivated, they're going to take the first offer they get. I mean, but you still have agents asking the questions they know that you should not be answering anyway, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And so if you think about it from both standpoints, so obviously for a list, when you're representing a seller, which we'll talk more about in the next section, there may be situations where they do need to get that offer accepted. And it may make sense to say that. What's the most important on both sides is that you're conveying information that your client has told you to convey. So it is ethic, and I think it's questionable ethically, but I have heard on various ethics panels that, you know, in general, we don't share what the highest and best offer is. However, if your seller says, you know what, I don't care, I want you to do it. I want you to tell everyone what the highest offer is because I want them to know if they can go higher. So then as a buyer's agent, if you're not asking that question, you could be kind of failing your client to do your due diligence. And so I think as agents, we all make our line in the sand as far as what we are comfortable doing. There are agents out there that directly will say, hey, what is the highest offer you have in your hand? Are you allowed to say that? And so that's where you have to have had that conversation with your client ahead of time. What's most common is they'll say how many offers they have. One of the things I like to ask is what, sometimes I will, if I trust the other agent, I will say, hey, my clients are thinking about this number. Would that be competitive? That's an acceptable question. They can kind of delicately, you know, pedal around that without bending any rules or breaking any rules. Trying to think of some other common ones. And I think those are all really relevant if you've already shown the property and you know your buyer's offering. We will get a lot of agents that just start the ball off that way, though. They'll ask 15 minutes worth of questions before they've even shown the property. And I know I, as a listing agent, granted, I'm just me. I can't represent anyone else. That annoys the heck out of me. And so then you've already started the tone off badly for your buyer if you do want to move forward. But, you know, a quick text, say, hey, my buyer seems really strong. I'm hoping to show it at this time. I personally think that's a great way to set the stage. But every listing agent's a little different, and that's where it can be helpful to just kind of get familiar with other agents within our market centers are a great way to start because Keller Williams has such a good footprint in all of our markets. But definitely know the styles of the agents that you're offering to. And with social media, oftentimes it's easy to just do a quick search on agent blogs to kind of get a feel for it. Like there are a couple agents in town, they don't text. You have to call them if you're going to set an appointment, if you want to have any communication with them. There are other agents that won't answer a phone call for your life. You know, even if the house is on fire, they are not going to pick up the phone. So doing your research there, and as you get experience, you'll start to know more about that. Jeff, did I answer your question in that little bit of a ramble? Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through the checklist of the actual material here just to see if I maybe already dug into it. So I might graze over something if I feel like I've already covered it. So before you write an offer, be sure you're fully prepared so you can work quickly and efficiently when the work actually begins. So that having that checklist ahead of time can be helpful. For me, if I have a signed buyer's agreement, or if I am 100% sure they are my buyer, I'll actually go into Zip Forms and pre-template all of their basic information. Because most of the time when you have a buyer, their loan type isn't going to change. The percentage that they're going to put down isn't going to change outside of the, the sales of price. And there's some basic information that you can kind of go ahead and pre-template into those forms that'll make that process super easy. Another way that I've seen people do and that I've done is just that first offer. Then we're really going to go into detail on what needs to be done with the clients and then make that template if you think you might be making multiple offers for them. And I will do that after I meet with them the first time rather than doing that when they make an offer on a house, because most of the time emotions are really high and they're really excited. And if you have to go back into the, how do you spell your name for legal documents and, go into detail about appraisal costs and earnest money costs, it can, well, it's always okay and better to do it now if you haven't done it before. But after that buyer's consultation is a perfect opportunity to do that. And you'll do a recap, but if you can reference back to the buyer consultation, it adds some value to why you did that. At the same time, of course, you're going to have made sure that you have a pre-approval letter. I will maybe show one property without a pre-approval, but with COVID, I stopped letting anyone in the door if they weren't pre-approved. Most listing agents are asking for that to happen ahead of time, just so that you're not showing properties to people who aren't approved. But you'll want to have that available or have the lender's information kind of on speed dial so that you can get that quickly. You'll want to put together a CMA for your buyer. So this is one that can be a little tricky in this market because you may put together a perfect CMA and the leading offer may come in 60,000 over or 20,000 over what you felt would be their high range. And so how I present this to the client is I say, this is a snapshot of where our market is now. And the reality is that could change tomorrow based on sold homes. This just gives you a fair assessment of what I think the highest offer might be. And so in a more balanced market, it would be rare to see anything go above that CMA value. And if they were wanting to go above that, you'd want to kind of just prepare them that the appraised value may come in low and have the conversation with them about, if that were to happen, obviously that's a negotiation point with the Oregon sales agreement. So you are protected there. They don't have to overpay, but at that point they've paid for inspections and they've paid for an appraisal. So there is quite a bit of out-of-pocket expense that they may have already put in if they use that as their safeguard, because the seller does not have to reassess value. In our area, we are finding it's still thankfully rare for that appraisal contingency to get waived. However, in more aggressive markets in the Portland area, I've been hearing about that for probably 3 to 4 years, where buyers are coming in and waiving that appraisal contingency. And so where you want to help your clients decide if that's something that they can do is, do they have cash reserves? If if their offer were to come in, you know, if you have a CMA that says 350 is the highest value that's likely to come up for an appraiser, and they want to offer 375, well, do they have an extra 25,000? Because if they do, and they're comfortable paying above appraised value, that may be where you you then could say, okay, well, we can make your offer a little more competitive to say up to this price, we're willing to waive the appraisal contingency. And that could set your offer apart. And so that's kind of how you would use that competitive market analysis. On the other side, in a different market, when I started, where I used that most often was to have a buyer make a competitive offer. So you get buyers all the time that say, oh, well, I don't care if that house is listed for 350. I want to offer 300,000. I'm sure they'll take it. And this is where you can procure a CMA that says, actually, 350 is the market value. You might be able to get away with, you know, a little less depending on what your findings are. But in our, you know, our market, you're more likely to be able to support that asking price. As a newer agent, this could also just be a tool that you use to make sure that your clients aren't over offering and to practice creating the CMA, which will be really essential in pricing homes well. And as you do those, I've talked to some people who are really data driven that will do you know, spreadsheets. I don't do spreadsheets. That doesn't work well for me, but going through the CMA process is always really helpful. And then reviewing tax records. So through Keller Williams, I think you can pay a small monthly fee to have access to RLID. You can always look up county records for free or have your escrow company help you pull tax records. So that's where you're going to be able to verify square footage. Make sure those facts that are listed in the RMLS are actually lining up with what's actually in county records. So there are a lot of cases where that's not accurate, but if you present that information ahead of time, it gives the buyers the power to make that decision on if it's important and also to know how essential it is that they verify that information. On those tax records, we can also, or the county records, we can verify the tax rate, make sure that's correct. And if there have been any renovations, the RLID account will show you any history of new permits and things like that. If you have the time and you're really wanting to be diligent in your showings, that's something that I've had buyer's agents do ahead of time so that they know when they're showing the house, oh, well, the heat pump was added in 2020. That's going to add a little value. The house that I just bought, there was a fire in 1995, and I was able to determine that from the tax records. All right, ensure that the property is still available. So fast moving market, it does happen where you get 3 offers right away or 5 offers or 10 offers and the seller says, you know what, I want to accept this. So you may have a scheduled showing and that doesn't guarantee that the house is going to be available. And even in scenarios where you've got a highest and best deadline, really watch that verbiage. Oftentimes sellers are reserving the right to accept an offer before that deadline. And so you always want to make sure that the home is still available. That's one that if I've showed the property and I know I'm going to offer and there's not a clear highest and best deadline, I will almost always message the other agent or call them depending on what I think their preference is to just verify information. That's also a good opportunity to ask that, how many other offers are competing if there are competing offers, and then also verify that it's still available. And if there are any particulars that would make an offer more appealing to their clients. So depending on how much detail and how much conversation they had with their clients, they may have not listed that, the sellers are they're looking for a property to purchase. And so they might need a 30-day rent back or something like that. And that can be stuff that will set your offer apart and help you build rapport and gather as much information about the property and the seller as you can for your clients. This is one, if I've done that, I typically will look at tax records before I do that. And if there's any question marks, so if it's showing up as it being in the flood zone, or if there is a discrepancy between what's in county records or what's in the listing, I might also ask the listing agent that too, if it's important to this, if it's important to my clients. And then, yep, and the next one's asking questions, which is exactly what we just talked about. Inquire about activity on the property. If there aren't any other offers, which hopefully will start happening soon, to ease the stress of the offering process, eventually we'll go back to normal. You can always ask, how many showings have you been getting? It's been sitting a couple weeks, and that's not normal in this market. I wouldn't say that's not normal in this market, but I might say, hey, it looks like it's been on the market a little bit. Is there what kind of feedback have you been getting about it? Or, maybe there was another offer in play that didn't show up. So you might be able to get some good information about the property that way. And then also ask for the seller's disclosures. Oftentimes this will be attached to the RMLS listing. But if you have your buyers approve of those seller disclosures when you're offering, that's just another piece of the puzzle for the sellers that they don't have to worry about. So if your buyers are comfortable with that ahead of time, sometimes those are available. And then we talked about finding out if there have been any other offers. Okay. And yeah, so that's that first that's what they're recommending as your checklist for preparing an offer, are going through those key pieces of information. And then, of course, the next step is going through and taking that information that you've just gathered and putting the offer together itself, writing the offer. So keep these guidelines in mind and use the checklist on the previous page as you write your offer. If you have or if you haven't, it's always good at this point when you're putting the offer together in discussion with your buyer to just go over the cash on hand that's needed, all those essential pieces of information. So maybe they had talked about doing 10% down. You want to verify that they're still doing that. Oftentimes their conversations with lenders will change depending on various price points. But you want to make sure that they know how much earnest money would be accepted if they accept the offer, if the sellers accept the offer, how much time they'll need to deposit that. So some buyers forget that has to be deposited within 3 days. That's something that you can fluctuate. And then I always like to remind them about the appraisal cost that would come in and the inspection. So any out-of-pocket expenses. I personally have had a couple buyers that, even though we talked about it in the consultation, they were surprised that they would have to pay for the appraisal, or they were surprised by the earnest money, or maybe they had a brother or sister tell them that, they could get away with $500 in earnest money and that would be no issue. With VA buyers, that's probably the biggest place that I see confusion with that upfront cost, is they think because it's a zero down, that means there's zero closing costs, which there are a lot of lenders that do offer low closing costs for VA buyers. But there are still costs attached to that. And so they still have to do their earnest money. Even if they are doing a no closing cost, no down, they still need to make that earnest money offer. And then the way you write your offer will be to make sure that that loan amount is reflective or not reflective of what they're expecting to get back. So if they have zero closing costs and zero down, you'll want to make sure that their loan cost is their sales price, but they're still bringing in their earnest money, and you'll let them know that that'll get refunded to them. And of course, in those situations, I always like to verify that that's actually happening with their lender. So in your My Transactions, You may have put in a checklist in your opportunities, which could help you with the checklist. You may want to bring your laptop or tablet with you when you meet with your clients. I personally don't like typing in front of clients. And so I will have that conversation or meeting with them. Typically, I'll have a conversation with them and then let them know I'll be following up with them either in a meeting or digitally. Most people are just doing DocuSign signings, and then I'll send them everything once I have it prepped and then tell them, hey, give me a call and we'll go over it. Or for the first offer, sometimes I'm sending it so that we can go over it via Zoom or in person. But if you're comfortable typing in front of you, could just type the offer right up in front of them. And then just being mindful that when your buyer is making an offer, they are essentially selling themselves to the homeowner. So a cover letter can make your client's offer stand out and serve the following purposes: summarizing the offer, and then also humanizing the offer. So especially in situations where you get the sense that the home has been owner occupied for a long time or may have some emotional attachment to the seller, these cover letters can really make a big difference. I know I just sold my very first home. Well, not my first home that I sold represented, but my personal home. And for me, I had put a lot of work into my gardens. That was really important to me. It was actually more important to me than the cost. Thankfully, my husband and my real estate mind kept me in check. But there was one offer that really stood out because they specifically mentioned that they would be maintaining the garden. And so for someone like me who's selling in that mindset, that might make a big difference. One thing I would say, I've seen more and more agents move towards not presenting cover letters, especially if those cover letters are giving any indications or violating any fair housing rules and regulations. So you just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, Amanda, I was going to say the same thing during the mega camp.
Mm-hmm.
You hear me okay?
Yeah, we got a little echo, but that's okay.
Okay. What is going on? You still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, I think we got it solved, technology. Yes, during mega camp, it was crazy because I know different states are handling things differently, and NAR is taking a stand in some of that. And we did a letter when we bought our house. You just mentioned it. It seems to be kind of commonplace, but because of, a lot of things that happened last year, I saw people in chat going crazy. Don't do this, don't do this. This is illegal, because even the agent, who was a big time agent, was saying, she wrote a letter and she was saying things like, my mom, who's elderly, is going, and we're going to be moving into this home in the neighborhood, and we're going to love this, and trying to put all the emotion into it. But the fair housing things about the familial status, about the neighborhood and the types of people in the neighborhood, about kids and family. So it sounds like what you're saying is that obviously, if you're ever concerned, go to your principal broker and make sure you're not violating with the cover letter. But if you stay away from those key things about ethnicity, religion, kids, you can still write an offer about, I'm amazed at the way that garden looked, and I'm excited to get my hands dirty and get in there. You're not giving away anything.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, Zoe wants to steal it back.
Oh, yeah.
Just because NAR there's actually a full article on NAR called Love Letters, and they are unequivocally recommending that you not only don't allow your clients to give them to sellers, that you don't even read them yourself. Like, they're super strict about it. So I just thought maybe that would, because I was surprised, because we wrote one, like Jeff said, but they were like, don't give them to men, don't read them, don't look at them, burn them on site. I mean, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, well, and I'm not surprised to hear that. And honestly, I thought about the cover letters that I personally wrote, and I was like, oh yeah, that's, from a real estate standpoint, I should not have done that. But it's happening, and so it's good to be aware of it. And I think the most important part is, until and unless that becomes a regulation on what's advised either through our brokerage or your brokerage, or through different regulations, be aware that that's something you should be kind of keeping an eye on if you encourage them. And I just have that conversation with the buyers. I say, you know what, you may not have time to do it. So if you do want to write a cover letter, do it ahead of time. You can customize it to the home. Specifically, it can make a difference. I always write a cover letter for my clients that is compliant. And what's important to the listing agent is what needs to be conveyed. So the things that are super important right now that we're seeing over and over again is, has the buyer physically been in the home, or did they do a virtual walkthrough? Do they know all of the details about the home? You know, if there's anything particular or weird, or if there was a home inspection on file that might have been missed by something mentioning, my clients looked at that. If they approved it already, then you definitely want to write that into your offer. But just really making sure the listing agent knows that you have done your due diligence as a buyer's agent, that you've had discussions with the lender, that they're strong borrowers, or if they have cash, that they have those cash funds available. I actually had a horrible situation when I was pretty new to listings where my seller adamantly wanted to accept this offer that didn't have verified funds. And I advised, I don't advise that you do that until we have verified funds. But she said, nope, we're going to do it. 5 days in, we're still waiting for verification of funds, and call the buyer's agent. Buyer's agent says, well, I have really awkward news. I just finally got my buyer to give me proof of funds, and he sent me an email saying that he won the New York lottery, and he had been part of one of those email scams that that money was never going to come in, and he did not have any other resources. So I had to give that hard news to the seller. Thankfully, I had advised her not to take the offer, and so it didn't look bad on me. It was more just a bad situation. We wanted to give the buyer the benefit of the doubt. But we do have a lot of people really jumping the gun at offering before they've seen a property, jumping the gun at wanting to offer because they think they're going to be pre-approved, and not all agents do that due diligence. So if you can show that in the cover letter instead of the kids and the religious affiliations and the other things that are not compliant or really fair to present, right? Because that's why fair housing is there, or why those rules were created. You can really craft a good cover letter for your clients, or read their cover letter ahead of time to help make sure their letter reflects that. So they can be used. And the other thing to be aware of, and just to be mindful of, and I tell my clients this, is when I'm listing a home, I don't present them. I 100% do not recommend presenting them to my seller, because I don't want my seller to make an emotional decision. I'm there to protect their bottom line and their interest. So unless they tell me, like I did to my husband, that was a key factor for how I wanted to decide on who to work with, then I'm not presenting that as a listing agent. And where we might present it is if we have two identical strong offers to make that decision. So, and that's
Amanda, do you have any examples of typical non-violating fair housing laws letter or content that you would send to somebody, so we have some example of what to avoid, the pitfalls that might be there? I know you probably don't have anything right now, but maybe you can put it out afterwards so we could see it, because I would love to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I can go over the key pieces. I don't have a template, but so I almost always will start out with like a little introduction of me, unless it's an agent that I know personally. I've been in business since 2012. I've done, I've represented a lot of buyers in this area. And I'm very familiar with, if it was like Hayden Bridge community, we're very familiar with the Hayden Bridge community, and I've looked at a lot of homes in this area with this client. Again, I would always alter this depending on what's true for my client. I don't like to puff up information. Of course, we're not supposed to do that as realtors. And I really try to take that to every level. But, you know, and then I'll go into what has my relationship been with this client? What can I speak to about my relationship with this client that will be helpful? So if the client has been extremely responsive, if they have physically gone into the home, if they really loved the home because of something that stood out. So I'll go back to that garden experience. My client really loved that you put so much time into your gardens, and they look forward to maintaining that. And then typically that third paragraph is going to be all about how strong they are as a buyer. So most people are using a lender. So if they're going with a go-to lender, then I'll go into detail about my relationship with that lender, how I know that they will follow through on their commitments. If I know that's true. If it's a new lender, I might just say, you know, the lender, I spoke with a lender, they verified all of the buyer's documentation, which that's a difference. Not all lenders actually run credit and verify documentation. So that's going to be something that stands out. And especially if you're working with a lender that you maybe didn't recognize when your buyer said, hey, I'm pre-approved with this lender. You really want to do that homework to make sure they're a good lender for your sake and for your client's sake. And then at the end, I always, you know, kind of put in that language to indicate that I'm confident that you'll love this offer and we look forward to any updates. Is that helpful?
So helpful. I'm making all kinds of notes right now.
Good. Well, and you guys, I'll put before we log out today, I'll put my contact information, and I'm open to having, you know, one-on-ones and sharing information to you that I have. Okay, so so this next section was when we were using .loop. So that's what that buying loop and offer document, I think that's a reference to .loop. But of course, we're not using that. We're using the opportunities. I like to go in and I like to keep my opportunities super updated with any relevant information and notes. So I think this next section is talking about just keeping that opportunities updated. So there's a note section in there. And then for each offer that you get, of course, for compliance, you have to put anything that you have signed by a client into our files. So you'd want to tag that appropriately. And then, of course, we have a DocuSign, so they can e-sign offers directly. And I'm finding with COVID, and honestly, I kind of switched to this maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where I realized buyers most of the time are going to make their most confident decisions and comfortable decisions if they're able to review offers and actually read through the offer on their own computer, on their own situation that they're comfortable with, as long as they have reliable internet and they're comfortable with technology. And then, like I said, I'll send them that. Sometimes if they have a lot of questions about that in the buyer's consultation, I'll actually send that to them ahead of time to say, hey, just so you're not having to read this 12-page document for the first time when you make an offer, I'll send this to you if I really get a lot of questions for them or a lot of hesitation or concern. Okay, and then your checklist so I guess before we go that, any questions there about writing the offer or any of the information that we've covered so far? We're good, okay. Again, if anything pops up, just put it in the chat box and I'll come back to it at the end. So the next checklist that we referenced is writing that offer. So, sorry, we just went through that already. So we went through into detail about the recommendations for kind of the steps, setting the stage. And then this is the actual checklist that Ignite's recommending for writing your offer. So you'll want to make sure you have your price and terms. So this is what I'll do in that verbal consultation, most of the time on the phone after we've been in the house. Before, camera security was more prevalent, and when the market was more conducive to being in the home for an hour, I might do this in person with a client in the driveway. I've found just for their security and mine, I've been transitioning more to doing that on the phone afterwards. So I'll leave them and say, hey, this all sounds great. For your privacy, I want to have this conversation with you once you've had a chance to think it through, and once you're at your home or in an area that you feel is safe. So I would either revisit with them in person or on the phone. And I'll say, hey, give me a text when you're ready to chat. And that gives them, if it's a couple, time to discuss terms, or if they have a family member or someone that they're consulting with in the offering process, they can kind of go over the basic details. So we're going to get from them the price and terms. So the sales price that they want to offer, oftentimes they will want you to send that CMA to them before they make that decision. 90% of buyers are going to say, well, what do you think I should offer? And that, of course, is the magic question. And I tell people, if I had a magic ball, I would be able to answer that. What I can tell you is I can tell you what the market says that a fair range would be for the price. And then I can tell you just based on the activity. So then while they're headed home, having their conversations, I will be calling a listing agent and doing my due diligence there. And what I'll leave them with is, I'm going to do a little bit more due diligence. And when I get back to the office, I'll be able to give you a call and maybe help guide you a little bit. But the biggest thing is that you should really think about what's the highest and best offer that you are comfortable with, assuming there's multiple offers for this home. So I'll come back to that. How do you rank this home on a scale of 1 to 10? I always say, the offer range is probably 8 to 10, maybe 7 to 10 in this market, because you just have to be a little more flexible. And, how disappointed would they be if they found out that someone had offered $2,000 more than them? So really to think about those numbers. And then for terms, we're really asking buyers to look at, bare minimums. Some things are pretty standard. So if it's a vacant home and appliances are there, it's safe to add in those appliances unless the notes say otherwise, but really guiding them on what they can ask for and what they can't. The other terms that are important, of course, are the inspection timeline, the earnest money amount, and then that closing timeline. So closing timeline is going to be determined by their lender. People will get really aggressive and put a 30-day close with a lender that everyone knows can't close a loan in 30 days. And that can bite you in the butt a little bit. You can do it to get your foot in the door, but ultimately a good listing agent is going to call and verify. And you should be doing that too, to make sure your lenders can give the term times that you're promising. And then earnest money should have already been discussed. Typical in most markets is 1%. If you know they have a ton of cash reserves, you might recommend that they do a higher earnest money, because that may look better to some sellers. And definitely keeping those timelines as short as possible while still allowing them time to do due diligence. So inspection timelines, sometimes if I want to be really aggressive with an offer, I'll actually send a message to the inspector that I know we're going to work with to say, hey, if I get an accepted offer on Thursday, what do you expect we could get in with? And if they're booking out 2 or 3 days, well, I'm going to write in a 5-day inspection instead of a 10-day. But 10 to 12 days is pretty typical in most markets. And in the summer months when inspectors are busier, you're definitely going to want to keep that long enough so that you're not running into issues. Next item on the checklist is reviewing those seller disclosures. So again, your buyers will look them over, and most of the time they are going to be looking to you to point out any red flags. So you want to have read them and make sure there's nothing that stood out, nothing that's blank that maybe needs answers. Oftentimes sellers will go through, they'll fill out the questions that they know or that they know aren't red flags, and they'll leave the other ones blank, and meaning to ask their listing agent about them. And sometimes they get submitted without all of the answers being completed. Conveyance, so fixtures versus personal property. It's important to explain that to your clients. Typically we'll do that in the buyer's consultation, but this is definitely one that I have had buyer's agents come back, and clients that we were working with on a team where the buyer says, I didn't know that I wasn't asking for the refrigerator, and and I don't remember the situation that I'm thinking of, but she didn't realize that she wasn't asking for appliances and she didn't have money to buy appliances. So it's really important to make sure the buyer understands what's being asked for and what's not. And then also what a fixture is versus personal property. So a built-in shelf is going to be a fixture, but a detachable shelf, isn't. And sometimes those things can be kind of tricky. So that may be something that you ask the listing agent in that follow-up question of, hey, it looks like I couldn't tell if that shelf in the living room was a fixture or not, but are the sellers planning on leaving it? Same thing, occupied homes, you might just ask or find out, are they planning on leaving the appliances? The most common ones in the Eugene Springfield area to see be in question of if they're going to be left is the washer and dryer. And then in more luxury homes, oftentimes the fridge is pretty specialty. And so if it's not custom fit, that's one that sometimes sellers will want to take with them. And then knowing that earnest money amount for your buyers, the seller acceptance period. So you can set a tight turn time for that. The seller ultimately has the power as to when they're going to respond. But I have had buyers that I've worked with that have had a good response from setting a shorter timeline and just saying, hey, we're here on a Thursday. They're planning on looking at offers on Monday, but we're going to go 50,000 over. And we're willing to do that to avoid being in a multiple offer situation. Depending on the sellers, that may be something they want to see and they might be willing to do. More often than not, I would say that doesn't work. So just kind of going with the flow of what the listing agent is planning on doing is going to be the most common. And then knowing your financing terms, are they conventional, FHA, VA? Those terms do make a difference, and you do have to get the seller's consent to change them. That's something that even some loan officers will try to change the terms after an offer has been accepted, and it can really be a point of contention. And then you'll want to have that buyer's pre-approval letter. Most lenders will write a custom letter for your buyer. And so depending on the dynamic between the lender and myself or the buyer and the lender, I'll either have the buyer send them a message and say, hey, we're going to offer on property for this amount. Or if I have a direct line of communication to them when I'm doing that research, and once I know what price we're going to offer, I'll request that. And then I'll let them know if there's a deadline. So if it's a Saturday afternoon and we're putting the offer together and we know it's not going to come in and, the seller's not reviewing until Monday at 5, I'll let the lender know that. That way they're not taking time away from their family on a Saturday or Sunday when they don't have to. Again, that's going to just build that better relationship with lenders for you in the long run. And it also too, that can help you. Again, I think it comes down to that building that rapport with the lenders, which helps on both sides. And then closing date. So again, making sure with your lender that if you're writing in a 30-day close or less than that, that's actually something they can deliver on. Home warranties. I think everyone ends up developing their feelings about home warranties. I personally don't write them in right now unless the buyer is going to buy them. But it is something that a lot of homeowners might want. And so it's something you want to have had that discussion with them about ahead of time. And it's not unacceptable to ask a seller to do that. That's a small enough item that most of the time, if that's the only thing that's setting your offer apart or in a negative light for the sellers, you'll just get a call from the listing agent to say, hey, my seller really likes your offer, but they don't want to pay for a home warranty. So that could be easily fixed with an addendum. And then repair limits. So if your client says, I think this might be addressing it in a different way, but one of the places we're seeing this right now is, say you have a buyer that is super handy and they say, you know what, unless it's like a big ticket, like over $5,000 kind of repair, we don't care about it. I'd say this is rare to find buyers that really feel that way. So you want to be careful writing it in, but it can, again, set your offer apart from other offers. Granted, if you're going into a property and you know the roof is shot and you put a $5,000 limit, the seller knows that roof is shot too. So that's not going to help you out. But where that can be helpful too is if they have presented an inspection report and the buyers have looked at it and they know everything looks good, that would be a good clause to add into your offer, or at least discuss that with your clients. And then special clauses or contingencies. So it's pretty common for a buyer to have gift funds or to be taking out essentially a low draw from a retirement account. Those things have to be noted in the offer. So if it's something that has any chance of not going through, so anything short of, you know, a withdrawal from an account where they have a guarantee of being able to get that, you want to write that in as a contingency. And then a strong cover letter, which we went over pretty extensively. All right, any questions about any of that? I'm seeing a question here about USDA homes. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so with USDA and VA, I would say that those are the most misrepresented. And I would say even if you see something listed as not being FHA financeable, it's always good to verify, especially if it's a strong option for your client. I find it's happened less recently, but you do run into situations where a listing agent doesn't want to overpromise. So maybe they're concerned, or they don't know for sure that it's USDA, or they don't know for sure that it'll go VA, and they don't want to represent it that way. The way that I was trained to list homes was to let the buyers do that due diligence, to put that out to the best of my knowledge. So if I thought there was any question of if it could go that way, I will list it that way. But there's a gray area because we're not loan officers, we're not appraisers, we don't know for sure. And some agents feel that it's unethical to say it is when they don't know. So it's always good to ask questions. From a buyer standpoint, I will, if they mention it to me and it's not coming up on their search, I will say, you know what, it most likely the condition doesn't meet the requirements, but let me check for you and just make sure. And so that's where I'll call the agent and say, hey, from the listing photos, it looks like this house is in good shape, but it's not listed that way. Are there any specific condition concerns that led you to not have it in there? And then some sellers could choose to not allow offers certain ways. This is going to sound awful, and thankfully I was able to talk my client out of this, but I had a client who had a misunderstanding about VA loans, that he thought that they were very hard to work with, and that if he accepted a VA offer that he was going to have to pay through the roof on repairs. So he specifically said, I don't want to accept VA offers. And I said, okay, well, I am a firm military supporter and I really don't think that's, I don't think it's good for you. And I don't think it's good for just general marketing your property to restrict your buyers that way. Let me tell you the truth about how these loans work, and then we come to that decision. But some listing agents might just say, okay, well, the seller doesn't want to do that, so I'm not going to list it there. And they don't have to agree to all terms. Does that answer your question, Chelsea?
Yes, I have first-time home buyers, and they are just dead set on USDA because of how their funds are right now. Like they're going to have enough for closing costs. They know what they need, but they don't have a huge down payment. And in this market, they've decided that they want to go USDA. And so I was told that certain areas like say Crestwell or Junction City, that all homes are USDA as long as they meet the qualifications, but anything like inside those boundaries are USDA. And so that's what I was curious about, is because a lot of the homes that you look at, you would assume some of the nicer kind of like newer regular neighborhood houses that look like they don't have major issues. Some of them just don't say USDA and some do. So I was just curious on if that's just the listing agent's way of saying they don't want USDA, or that they just like didn't include that. I would always just on my side reach out to ask anyways. I wouldn't just not try, but I didn't know if that was, you know, when they under that, when they put the loans that they would accept. I didn't know if they were like trying to exclude the USDA, because I have heard that those can take a little longer, and so maybe some people don't love those loans. So I wasn't sure on that. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I would say the biggest, so aside from, I would say the most common are higher priced homes are sometimes not going to get listed as FHA or USDA just because they exceed the loan limits of those properties. And then you also run into with USDA because it's income capped. So when you get into a certain price point of homes, they're going to have to bring money in because that loan amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if they do USDA and you're representing the buyer, would you suggest that maybe as far as earnest money goes, because also they're really dead set on, like, they had a scenario where their friends only put down $1,000 and they got in. So it's been a lot of educating on my part for them to say that may have happened. It's not something that maybe like would never happen again, but in this market, I wouldn't suggest banking on that happening. And so I've told them up front that they should have a good amount of earnest money to put down, you know, that they feel comfortable with. And of course, it's their amount that they want to put down. I don't make that choice, they make it. But that the higher the better. So with the USDA, if you're in this competitive market, would you suggest that they put down even a little extra because they're going for a USDA loan versus maybe a house that's listed in USDA territory, but that would rather probably have like a conventional to choose from rather than a USDA? Does that make sense? Like, how can you make the buyer's loan look more appealing if they're going for USDA, but there's 4 other offers that are conventional, you know, that are going to go faster, that might not take longer, that might not have as many restrictions?
Yeah. So USDA loans, so the reputation of the lender is going to be a big one. Just making sure that it's a lender who does a good job and has good communication. So that might be a case where I might ask my lender to call the listing agent and follow up directly, especially if that borrower is a strong borrower that happens to be doing USDA, because then they can also convey like the speed that USDA homes are turning at right now. If the buyers are comfortable, it sounds like they might not be. If they're concerned about the earnest money amount being low, they might not want to do this, but you might make that earnest money non-refundable after the inspection period. You know, as long as it's not related to the sellers canceling. But unfortunately, loan type does come into play. So that's where I might just have that hard conversation with the buyer. If they can go another option, they might be in a better position to compete. Unfortunately, even conventional buyers are struggling because there's a lot of cash buyers out there. So there's always that next tier of comfort. And that's just part of the disadvantage of what they're doing. And they're also, you know, if they're just looking in USDA areas, there are other buyers who can only go USDA. So I hope that helps. The other time that I might see USDA or FHA or VA ruled out is if there's a lot of dry rot on the property or peeling paint that the sellers will not or do not want to deal with. So that can even be outbuildings. USDA and VA have regulations on where the well is in proximity to the septic. So that can be a reason why it's left out. And then I believe USDA also doesn't allow anything that's in the flood zone. You'd want to verify that, but that could be a play as far as why it might not be in there. So I hope that helps. Anyone else have any questions about this section? Okay, I think we're good. All right, so buyer objections. So when the buyer wants the seller to make repairs, you've got a couple scripts here. And then when the buyer wants to make a low offer. So I like to do this section with you guys reading these. I know you've got your scripts in there, and I apologize. I don't think that I've been keeping our PowerPoint. Oh, I guess I was. Never mind. I take it back. It's been totally on track. So who wants to volunteer to do the first role play? When the buyer wants the seller to make repairs. Are you guys, can you hear me?
Are you asking us to just read it, the section out loud?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So do you want me to run all the way through 1, 2, and 3, just all in a row?
Yeah, let's do it that way. We'll just break it up into two chunks.
Okay. I'll start off by the first part.
Okay.
I'll, instead of buyer, can I just say Lewis?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, until you have a physical inspection, we will not know how much these items will cost. And we could find additional repairs we may want to negotiate. Consequently, you have 3 choices. You can offer the seller less money now to compensate for these items. You can ask the seller now for a credit to repair these items using your own contractor. Or I usually advise clients to wait for the physical inspection and negotiate all repair items at one time. How would you like me to negotiate this offer on your behalf?
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So I will add to that and you may already know this, but in our current market, it is confusing and stressful. I would say it's confusing and stressful for everyone in any market if you try to negotiate repairs in your original offer. And if you are competing, unless your negotiation on repairs is accepting the house as is, which you want to be very, very careful with, it's definitely going to make it a challenging negotiation just because it's uncommon in our market. It may be different in other areas, but in the Eugene Springfield area, it's definitely not common to see that. So what I tend to recommend to clients is to really look at the house in its current condition and offer their offer price based on that. And obviously it does come down to their decision as to what they want to do. So if they want to do something different, we need to be their advocates in what they want done. But in that, I have had some newer agents come to me and not talk them out of that after giving those 3 options, and it can be more stressful than need be. And so that's where you can come in and say, you know, this is going to be the best option for you. So either doing, and even doing the credit, because you may, unless they're waiving their inspections, they may find other things that they want done, and then you've pre-negotiated those repairs, and it's just not typically a good idea. Okay, so who wants to do the script for when a buyer wants to make a low offer? Someone different.
I can read it.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, Mrs. Smith. There are 3 ways to negotiate a transaction. You can make a low offer and run the risk of the seller rejecting it or countering back at full price to compensate. Or you can make an offer closer to the asking price and be less flexible if there is a counteroffer. And another option is if you really want this home and are concerned that another buyer may purchase it, you can make a full price offer and give the seller what they want. It's your choice though. How would you like me to negotiate this offer?
Excellent. Yep. And in this market, again, this is a conversation that it's going to have helped you if you've done that CMA. When you do a CMA, I believe through RMLS, it will show you the percentage over asking that homes are going in that price point or in that pool of properties. And I've used that a lot to help people see that. And you might even pull up individual properties. So like there was one that a client recently offered on Center Drive. I don't know if you guys saw that, but you know, it went for, I think 60 or 70,000 over, and it's closed now. So it was a short closing period. So thankfully we were able to see that, but that's going to be a tool that can really help your clients see what's really happening versus what they think is happening. And you want to kind of tread around that delicately. And that's why it's good to give them the choices, help them understand so that they can make the decision, because this is a conversation that can lead to, well, gosh, I don't want to deal with this market. I might just, just wait. I'm going to wait till next year when it's better. And a buyer may determine that that's the best choice for them, but it rarely is. So, all right, you guys, do you want to practice scripts? Do you want to practice these on your own? I can group you guys out into teams, or if you feel comfortable with this as is, we can move on. So give me a big thumbs up if you want to actually practice this, or if you just want to have some quiet time to practice it or read it out loud. Now, I'm going to vote that we just, instead of doing the back and forth in this one, because that can be a little messy breaking out into rooms, just go ahead and read through. We'll take like 2 to 3 minutes and let you read through these on your own so that you have read through them and maybe say them out loud on your own. Does that work? Good? Good? Yeah, okay.
Through what page?
It looks like this should be on page 17. And at various points as I've been teaching Ignite, sometimes these are right and sometimes they aren't. Does anyone have it in their manual to verify?
Just to clarify, so you're talking about the scripts still?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. We have on page 17, when the buyer wants the seller to make repairs, when the buyer wants to make a low offer, and then it changes to page 18, present the offer to the listing.
Oh, yep. And we didn't
You
read
want to
that
keep
one.
going on that too? And then on to page 19, which is representing the seller and all of those scripts, because it keeps going.
Yeah, let's just do this section. Let's just do this section. So presenting the offer to the listing agent, I found is a hard one to script in class. There is this script here. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and just read through that too. Or if someone wants to read that out loud. Let's just go ahead and read through all three, and then we'll come back to, because the next section is representing the seller. So we're going to shift our focus. I know I talked a little bit about both sides, but we're going to shift our focus to those checklists on the sellers next. And so the scripts coming up should be regarding the seller. Well, and I think that's why that's not, because this is actually the third part of our section. This looks like an entirely different part. So presenting the offer to the listing agent, calling the listing agent immediately to let them know the offer is coming in. So once you do get to that point where you have your offer prepped and ready to go, you want to let them know that it's coming. Do not just rely on email. A lot of emails get shuffled into spam folders unless it's someone that you have a dialogue with already. So some agents like to call, some agents like texting. Regardless of what you do, make sure that you get a response, because it's not impossible that the email was wrong or that it got shuffled into spam. And then Ignite recommends doing the shortest time allowable in your market for response time. And so if it's not posted, you might just ask them, hey, when will your sellers be reviewing offers? And that way you can update your clients if their response time was different. Okay, everyone have a chance to read through those couple of scripts. They were pretty short. All right, so moving on to representing the seller. So Getting a listing in this business is harder than getting a buyer, especially in the market that we're in now. And so you really want to make sure that when you handle listing, that you handle it with the utmost professionalism and due diligence, just like when you're representing a buyer. But you're a lot more in the public eye with a listing, since most marketing happens from the listing side. And you really have your opportunity to set the stage and show your expertise with what's going on with the market. So when a buyer makes an offer on your client's property, there are 4 actions to take. You'll receive the offer, gather information about the buyer, and then present the offer to your client, and then allow your clients to respond. Again, just like when we're working with the buyer, you will want to have set the stage for this process ahead of time. That way this is not brand new information to them. Especially with multiple offers and short timelines, it can really ease some stress in a seller's mind. And most of the time at this point, they have put in a ton of work getting their house photo perfect, and they might be really stressed out about how much money they may or may not make. And they definitely will be getting information from people who have 0 experience selling homes in this market as to what they should expect. Everything from, if you don't get $50,000 over asking price, that your agent didn't do a good job, to, if you, on the other side of that, and this one always blows my mind, of if you get 10 offers in the first 3 days that you underpriced your home. So you're kind of in a situation where you may get objections that you didn't even think you would if you didn't know that ahead of time. So, and regardless of how good you market the home and how much work you put in, there will be sellers who say, oh, well, it's just a hot market. So set your ego aside, do your best job, have your checklist, and just prepare yourself and your clients as best as you can. So receiving the offer. First, thank the buyer's agent for the offer. That is going to set you apart in the industry tremendously. There are so many listing agents that basically treat buyer's agents like they are a burden. And we all know that that's not true. If and when the market shifts into a buyer's market, you definitely want to be an agent who is recognized by everyone, not just buyers or sellers agents. So definitely honor the fact that you know how hard those buyer's agents are working to get that offer in front of you, and be kind. So text messages, calls, emails, again, every agent develops what makes the most sense for them. Super easy to set up a template in your Gmail or your email that just says, hey, thank you so much for this offer. We will be reviewing offers shortly, or if you have a set timeline, really help them be a great agent for their clients too, to stay in communication. Or just a short text message, hey, I got your offer, thank you so much. I'll be in touch shortly with any questions once we've had a chance to look at it. Assuming that that's true. You're gonna look over the offer, check for accuracy, completeness. Typically before I do, so after I've done that initial short response of, hey, I got your offer, I'm gonna be checking for misnomers. So sometimes a pre-approval letter may mention property, or their cover letter may mention that they're selling a property, but the offer doesn't. You wanna make sure that you have the correct information on the form, and don't always assume that what's on the offer is correct. So there are a lot of agents out there who, for terms, they will overpromise and underdeliver. So they'll do a short-term turn time. So if you see a 15-day close timeline on a USDA offer, you might really have a strong conversation with the lender before you present that information to your client to say, okay, is this realistic? What is the realistic turn time? That way you can either have that conversation with the buyer's agent or the lender, or make the adjustment appropriate if that's the offer that you want to accept. And then of course, clarifying personal property. So if your listing says washer and dryer included, and they don't put washer and dryer in the offer, I would always verify that. Some agents assume that's what's in the marketing will be included. And that's not true. What's in the offer is what's included. So that, I guess that's one to remember for both sides. And then that's where, again, kind of being mindful. Like I said, some agents will send that back with a highlighter. Thankfully, I've not run into that in our market, but I've heard horror stories. And I definitely have had some agents call with a little harsher tone than I expected. But you never know what kind of stress they might be under. And so as a listing agent, you're going to be gathering information about the buyer. So how long has the buyer been looking? Have they been pre-approved by a lender? Do they have to sell anything before they can procure or follow through with their cash offer or their loan? Are they from out of town, and why are they moving to the area? Why this is relevant is we want to know if they're going to be in town when we close. So especially if this is an offer that you think your seller is likely to accept, you really want to know how that closing timeline is going to look. Because if they're out of area, there are some documents that may need to be physically mailed in for closing. You don't have to get too hung up in that, but it's good to know. And the other part about that is if they're out of town, did they physically see the property? We get a lot of buyers who haven't seen the property, they offer, then they come up. That may be another piece that, they may not have realized that the property was in an area that is common for someone who knows the area. And so those are just things to keep in mind with the whole picture of the offer. Why did they select this property in particular? That again can kind of give you a little bit of an indication of how much they know about the property. And then how did they come up with their offer price? I have to say that's not a question that I've asked before, unless it was a lowball offer. And that can be helpful. So if you know that your listing price is not quite on point with market, so maybe you had a seller that really wanted to be aggressive and was at the tippy top of your spectrum of what you thought the property could go for, and you come up with an offer that is more in line with what you think is realistic, it might be helpful to find out why they offered what they offered. Because if they offered with comps, I might ask the agent, I might say, hey, can you send me the CMA that you made to come to this price? Especially if this is the only offer that we've gotten in the last couple of weeks and I want to try to sell it to my client. And again, that's less, I haven't had that happen in quite a while, but it can be helpful. I had one in Florence come up that the offer was $100,000 under our listing price, and they were able to fully support it. And that was really helpful in presenting it and making it not offensive to the client. And then have they made offers on other properties? If so, what happened in those negotiations? I would say less about offers and more, I might ask if they've had any offers accepted and had to back out, because that can be helpful. Maybe they didn't go through negotiations well. All right, so that's kind of the preface of the information that you should be gathering. And then we've got the checklist for reviewing an offer. So you want to make sure the address is correct. You'd be amazed at how often that comes up incorrect, especially if your listing has multiple tax lots attached to it. Sometimes that description can come up missing, but verifying that all that information is correct. Make sure the price falls into the range of your seller's expectations. So if it's under or over, again, kind of understanding that that intention with the buyer's offer can be helpful. If it is over what you believe will be supported by an appraisal, that might be another question to gather from the buyer's agent to say, okay, this is, I don't know if I would say this, but if I knew that my seller was going to be super attached to that and unwilling to negotiate, I might say, hey, this seems high for the comparables that I've seen. Is your buyer prepared to release the appraisal contingency? Or are they going to try to renegotiate? Earnest money, make sure the earnest money amount is specified and within a range that's acceptable to the buyer. for the seller. Check your acceptance timeline to see how long your seller has to respond. Verify that the buyer is pre-approved. Again, coming back to that pre-approval letter, I will always have a conversation with a loan officer. You want to verify that they've not only pulled credit, but they've seen documentation to verify, especially with COVID and people having lost time on job. That can be important. This one feels like a gray area as far as if it's ethical, but I know it's happening, is if they were out of work or if their work is in an industry that is at risk because of COVID. Hopefully we're moving away from that being an issue, but it can cause some issues in the loan process.
I have a question about that, just as far as like, if your clients change work, right, or do something like that, and say the loan officer says, oh yeah, that's, you know, not that big of a deal, and then later on we're getting into it and the loan officer is having more questions. This is obviously a more specific example, but and then
yeah,
the listing agent is kind of wondering like, how come we're not where we should be by now, and you know, so just trying to figure out like, how do you help safeguard that up front, because I can see now from, I mean, just from this, like why it is so important that that listing agent does have those questions or does follow up and is curious about your client like that.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, if they've had a job change, obviously on a buyer's agent standpoint, you might not want to disclose that upfront, but on a listing agent side, you absolutely would want to verify. Again, this is another one that cover letters can get buyers in trouble or raise a red flag where maybe there doesn't need to be, where they might mention moving recently or something like that. But you want to make sure that if they're changing industries, that their lender knows about it, or if they're changing positions, that they have most of the time they need an accepted job offer in writing in order for that to transfer over, or a certain amount of time on job before closing. And so those are totally relevant questions to ask the buyer's agent or the lender. The Oregon Sales Agreement gives us permission as the listing agent to have open dialogue with the lenders. And if the lender won't discuss it, that's where I would move to the buyer's agent. But that's definitely going to be something I'm asking about. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and that's actually really helpful because I'm in a transaction as a buyer's agent, and I was kind of wondering like, well, why is this listing agent asking all these questions of my client? Like, obviously not reaching out to the client, but like to the lender and to myself. And so this makes a lot more sense now.
Yep. Yeah. And your offer does dictate the amount of time that they have to make loan application, right? So if it is holding up that loan application, or if it's holding up the appraisal timeline, that's something you want to stay in good communication with. Most of the time, you're going to be able to stay in pretty good graces with everyone as long as you stay in communication. Where it becomes really troublesome is, you know, after the inspection period, the appraisal isn't ordered, you know, a month into the sale. Well, we're not closing in 45 days, period.
Right, right.
And so the seller does not have to make any changes to that contract once it's extended. And so staying in good communication, making sure you're really pushing your loan officers to give you the information that you need to do due diligence for your clients. Because if they can prove that your buyer neglected to tell them that their loan got, you know, denied, or that something relevant changed to their situation, then their earnest money may be at risk.
Thankfully, we've been able to move through like the appraisal and inspection and all of that, and we are in closing, but there's still some last minute pieces, is what the loan officer is calling it, that we're like waiting on. So I'm
yeah,
definitely working with my coach on it, but I'm also kind of just thinking ahead of like, you know, how do I maybe prepare myself better for the next situation that might come up like this.
Yep, absolutely. And just again, staying in that good communication is the most essential thing. It's really common for the file to come out of underwriting and then have a couple things that need to be addressed. So with a job change, it's really common for a lender to need that verification of the new income. And so as long as they did their calculations correctly, hopefully it'll all check out, but it might take a couple more days or a little bit more time.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah. So, and so that, I guess part of that is financing terms. So sometimes I might ask, like, if they have an FHA loan versus a conventional loan, I might ask if they have to go FHA. Sometimes a buyer is going with FHA so they can get that lower interest rate, but they are capable of going conventional. Where that might be relevant is if I know that, you know, the house is in great shape, but there's a shop on the property that's in a little rough condition. And that's also going to tell you a little bit about the strength of the buyer as well. The closing date, we've talked about that. So again, on the seller side, you want to confirm, you want to look at that. You want to make sure clients know when it's expected and what is actually a realistic closing date for the loan officer. And then the other thing to be mindful of here on the seller side is, gosh, I forget which months it is, but depending on what time of year we're closing, it may affect their closing, their total closing costs at the end a little bit differently on the buyer or the seller side, what the closing date is. And then for any homeowner who has a mortgage currently, you know, if they close before the 15th of the month, then they're not going to have to make a mortgage payment. If they close after, they're going to have to make a mortgage payment. So that can affect people. And you can do your net sheet with the accurate closing date when you know what that is. And then making sure you know if the buyer expects the seller to pay for a home warranty. Making sure everyone's clear about appliances versus fixtures. We talked about that. And so this is again relevant on the seller side. If they've requested any repairs up front, make sure that the seller is clear on that when you're presenting the offer. If they have any special clauses or contingencies, you want to make sure you know what the risks are. So the biggest special clause that we might see would be the sale of another property. So it would be completely acceptable for you to ask for verification that they have an offer on a property already if they're presenting it that way, to ask for a CMA and maybe detail on how fast they expect a property to sell if they have a home to sell that's contingent. And then if it's something that you're not familiar with, like a loan from a family member, gift funds, again, there are two parts of that. You want to get clarification on the risk factor there, right? Because if they're getting a loan against their retirement accounts and it's pretty much a sure thing, it's just a matter of time. Or if they're working with a special buyer, like a first-time buyer program, you want to know if that program has any special contingencies attached to it. So like Oregon Bond has some contingency programs. SHOP has some special requirements and an additional inspection that's required. So not that those things are bad or good, but it's important that the buyer's agent knows how to handle them. And if they don't, that you do, so that you can make sure everyone gets through the sale in a smooth transaction and everyone's happy at the end. And then again, that you know the risks involved. HOAs and seller disclosures, mold disclosures, those kinds of things. Again, like we talked about, if they have accepted those ahead of time, it's not a big difference one way or another. It's very rare for a seller's disclosures to cause issues unless there's a big red flag in there. But HOAs sometimes really can. If the buyer doesn't know there's an HOA fee attached to a property, or if it has really strict guidelines on the CC&Rs, you want to verify that they know that. The biggest place where we'll see this is when there's some sort of approval. I find that's where we get the biggest hiccups from it, is in like manufactured home parks where there's rules and regulations, or a buyer has to be approved to live there. And then possession date. So making sure there's a clear possession date. You have the option to write in close of escrow, of course, if it's vacant or if your clients have a place to go. That's easy, but a lot of sellers in this market either have to purchase a property or maybe need a few days afterwards, because they're not going to get the funds from close until the day after closing most of the time. And so you want to prepare your clients for that and know if they need like 3 to 5 days afterwards, after they have their money, before they're going to move out. All right, so that's the checklist with a lot of extra details. And then presenting that offer to your client. So again, once you've gathered all that information, you're going to be ready to call your client or meet with your client and review those offers. I like to do a cover letter, so just a little summary, and I've started seeing some listing agents actually ask the buyer's agent to put a cover letter together for them. Again, I use the Gmail template, and I just have a checklist of things that I put on there. I put the sales price, the net price, earnest money amount, who they want to have work with for escrow. We'll do the inspection timeline, any special contingencies, and then when they need an acceptance and when they're expecting to close. And then I'll attach a net sheet. And again, I do like to do this digitally. I just think it gives the client the opportunity to have whatever their natural response is going to be. And then we can come back and have a conversation just based on the data. So I find it helps in low offers or great offers either way. It just gives them the opportunity to really look at it at their own pace. And of course, if you were doing this in person, it saves a lot of paper to be able to just print out a summary and say, these are the offers you have. Makes it really easy for them to compare offers. So first you're gonna call your client, let them know that you've received an offer to present. I will always do that via call unless they have specified that they prefer email or text. Inform them of the offer, the price, and the closing date. This is where I don't tend to do that in the conversation. I will tell them it's a strong offer. I'm going to send you all the details. If possible, to present the offer to your clients in person, bring your laptop or tablet with you so that you have an option to review online. Keep the tone of conversation as positive as possible at all times. Never criticize the buyer, their agent, or their offer. So even in situations where you may have multiple offers, I find that this really is helpful because you never know if something's going to happen with one of these offers, and that offer that you maybe didn't have a great connection with or maybe wasn't ideal in the beginning might end up being the highest and best offer, or the offer that your client likes the best. And then, of course, if we're in a conversation with a seller where the offer is lower than they expect, I always present a positive rate. Great news, we have an offer. You're probably not going to love the price, but we have a starting place, which is always good news. Of course, more often than not right now, we've got multiple offers and a couple showings lined up still. So I haven't had to have that hard conversation in a while. And then you'll explain the offer or do that cover sheet in a way that's easy for them to digest. Again, kind of going back to a more balanced market, if I were reviewing a single offer and we had been on the market for more than just one weekend, we would also be talking about how many days it's been on market, what our feedback has looked like, what our showing feedback has looked like, and our numbers. And an updated CMA just to see if the market has shifted since they listed. And that can be really helpful in negotiating offers that are maybe less than ideal. And they have 3 options. They can accept the offer and start on the contract to close process. They can counter the offer. Again, most often with countering the offer, unless it's something that's been sitting, we're seeing minor details countered, but they do have the option. So say they had a strong cover letter and they've got multiple offers. They really like buyer A, but maybe buyer C has the highest and best offer. The seller can counter back with a different price. So maybe they like all the other terms. So they do have that option. Or they can just reject the offer. And I really, really try to get clients not to do that. Most of the time, if you get a flat rejection without multiple offers, there's an emotional component to it. And I just remind clients that this is a financial transaction. At the end of the day, this offer is a starting place. If it's not what you want, I recommend that they counter it to get the offer exactly what they want. Okay, any questions about any of that? I feel like we powered through that really fast. Good, okay, excellent. All right, so your turn in presenting offers. So with a partner, practice the scripts on the next 2 pages for presenting offers. Do you guys want to break into rooms and do the back and forth, or do you want to do like we did before and just read through? Someone vote for the group.
I say we read through.
Read through? Okay. Do you want to start us out with the first section?
Sure.
Thank
So present the initial offer to your seller.
Mhm.
Script. Good morning or afternoon. It's Chelsea Hart with Keller Williams. We have an offer here for your review. I'm going to go through the offer with you. Is this a good time? Now the offer they came in with is X amount of dollars. They're putting X amount of dollars as earnest money, and this percentage is a total down payment. They want to close on this date, and they're asking for this percentage in repair limits. What do you think?
I think that sounds fabulous. Let's accept it.
All right. Am I still going? Somebody else.
Oh, so what's someone else? Who wants to present a low offer to your seller? Someone new.
I'm going to go ahead and out myself and tell you that I don't have my book in front of me because I am at my grandma's house.
Okay.
A good hour away. Otherwise, I keep wanting to volunteer to read, but I can't.
Oh,
Same. And I'm in the car, or I would as well.
okay.
So
can
cheers
do
to
it.
those who can.
I can do it. This one's really short though. Present a low offer to your seller. Never criticize or show a negative attitude about a low offer. Present all points of agreement first before discussing pricing or other disagreements. Now, that's lower than our asking price, but it's an offer we need to decide on. What would you like to do?
Do you want to go ahead and do the next section since that one was? Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Recommend that your client accept the offer. I will urge you to consider this offer very carefully and consider the value of meeting your moving goals. In the long run, meeting your overall goal of selling your home is the most critical need, correct? Your property's been on the market now for 5,000 days, and the average time on market for this area is 10 days. Buyers are going to look at the same data. They're going to see that your neighbor's house sold for only $300,000 and the house around the corner sold for $310,000. You're going to want to pay fair market value compared to other sales. If you accept this offer, the probability of closing and meeting your goal is 100%. You want to meet your goal, right?
Yeah, I'm moving to Florida. All right. So with both of these, of course, in our market, you're going to want to make that recommendation if you know the data lines up with it. If it's the first offer in and it looks good, but the lender won't answer the call, or there's no reason to think that you're not going to have 10 showings after this, you might say, hey, let's give it a little time. So especially first, second week on market, or if you get offers on like a Thursday, Friday, an easy one to kind of get sellers through and kind of set their mind at ease is, hey, I know this offer doesn't look great and you're expecting multiple offers. I might not reiterate that for them, but if that's what they've said, I hear your concern that this offer isn't what you wanted. And we do have showings lined up for Saturday and Sunday, assuming that's true. How about I give the buyer's agent a call and just say, hey, for the best result for everyone, my seller is going to hold response till Monday. If your client decides they want to change your offer at all, that would be great, but they want to hold their response till Monday. So that's going to do a couple of things for you. It's going to give your seller the peace of mind of knowing this is the best offer that's come in this weekend. And that way, when you get down the road later on, they're not going to say, well, we already took 20,000 off. Why are they asking for a brand new roof? Something like that. So I have found that to work 9 times out of 10. I've only had one buyer back down after that. So I will have the conversation when I ask people that. I say, well, what if the buyer's not willing to wait? And they say, they might say, well, then we'd be disappointed. Well, then you should accept the offer now. If they say, well, we'd be fine with that. We've got savings. We can have the house on the market for another 5,000 days. You might reconsider your marketing budget, but but sometimes that is enough to help them get off the fence.
Amanda, is there a general, how long can you do something like that? Like if an offer, like you said, in this example comes in on a Thursday, but they just put it on the market Wednesday, they're expecting open houses, but they don't want to just reject the offer. They want to keep that interest.
Mhm.
You said it seemed, you can say, hey, we want to hold off and keep the offer and respond Monday.
Mhm.
Again, the buyer doesn't have to say yes. They could say, no, just cancel it. It's done. But
Mhm.
how far out? I mean, is there any legal thing about pushing it out further and further? It's just a negotiation.
Nope. Well, and then you'll see some agents, they won't have their sellers respond for 10 to 15 days, period, or 2 weeks. So
I'm gonna tell her she froze.
I think you just froze, Amanda.
Yeah.
2 weeks is the long. Am I back?
Okay, now you're back.
Okay, excellent.
2
Sorry.
weeks. We lost you at 2 weeks. Oh, you froze again.
Yeah, Mike. You there? There? Can you hear me now? I don't know how to fix this.
I think you might be okay. I'm seeing your camera moving normal again.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so 2 weeks is where we lost you.
Okay, so yeah, 2 weeks is that longer timeline. There are some agents that feel that long time kind of, I don't remember who it was who said, their client didn't, because their client couldn't take time off work. So that's kind of the philosophy on that longer timeline of they want to make sure the playing field's level so that as many people as possible can get into the home. Not necessarily doing that unintentionally. So I find that helps just to kind of recognize that and honor that when clients are offering, that it's not a race if we're trying to be fair, because some people literally can't afford to take a day off work to offer, but they're strong buyers. So on the realistic side though, most buyers that are serious about a home, unless, like we talked about before, they're going in with a super strong offer. It's all cash. It's got a high down payment. They've released inspections or something that's really aggressive in order to be competitive. If it's not that kind of offer, I would set the tone for Monday if my client really wanted to see that through. However, I would also say oftentimes the best offers are the first offers, because those are the buyers who have been out looking. They've probably been in multiple offer situations already. They're really ready to do something. So if I get the sense in the conversation with the buyer's agent that buyer will walk, which is very rare, then I might say, okay, well, what would make this offer worth accepting right now to you? But most of the time, the buyer is going to be fine with waiting until Monday. We're going to give everyone an option to give their highest and best by Monday. So even if you're listing on Thursday or Wednesday, that's realistic. On the listing side, where I might question that, I actually just had one come up like that. I had a little condo in Lincoln Schoolhouse, fabulous little place, and we had all day of showing the first day. The second day we had all day of showing. We had nothing lined up for Saturday or Sunday. And they had a really strong offer on the table. So I encouraged my clients then to take it, because I already thought that the offer on the table was probably going to be over appraised value. So what is the point in risking going that much over? So that's my personal perspective. Every listing agent is going to kind of develop their own scripts or policies and practices. And the most important thing is that you're doing that either at the discretion of your buyer, or that you're doing it consistently, that you're not advising one person to take an offer right now because you just want to get something into contract, and you're advising another client to wait 2 weeks. So unless there's a specific reason why. Does that help? Okay, excellent. All right, and so our next one is recommend that your client make a counteroffer. I I think we're at the point where we can do repeats if anyone else, if someone's already.
I'll read it.
Okay, excellent.
Recommend that your client make a counteroffer. We look at any offer as a positive thing initially. We always recommend a counteroffer instead of rejecting an offer. It may be that we can negotiate this up to where we need it to be. Let's put together a solid counteroffer. We need to get it back to them quickly to keep things rolling and see if we can make this offer work. I think the thing to focus on here is the price you want to get for your house. Putting this offer aside, if you could get this home sold and closed in 30 days, what would you feel comfortable selling it for today? Let's put together a counteroffer that would put us in the range where you feel comfortable. Remember, not all offers are going to work, but it's a good sign that we're getting an offer. You've made this person's list as a house they thought was one of the best homes for the money. I'll call the other agent and ask them how they came up with that price.
Yeah, so very, very similar to what we've just talked about. Any questions about any of these objections or other possible objections? No, okay. All right, so the next portion is responding to the offer. So once you and your clients have made the decision on how to proceed based on the offer you received or offers, you will need to respond to the buyer's agent. So I'll add into this, if there's multiple offers, I respond to the accepted offer first, and I wait for that to be fully signed before I notify anyone else, as long as timeline will allow that. So you want to not mark your listing pending before you let everyone else know, but you do want to make sure that it's a full binding agreement before you let anyone else go, unless you are going to offer backup position. If you have any question marks about the buyer that is getting accepted, and maybe even not if you have question marks, if you have multiple offers that are well within the range that your seller should and would accept them, you might consider offering a second and third place backup when you accept. And so in that condition, you might have all of those people sign with appropriate verbiage and then notify anyone else. I always let people know, anyone who's not accepted, I thank them for their time in offering. I would consider it best practice to call each individual buyer's agent if you have the time and availability. At the very least, do a nice, again, you can do a templated, thank you so much for your offer. It's a very hard, I wouldn't add this in, but it is a very hard market for buyer's agents sometimes. So being kind can go a long ways. So you'll present your counter offer if they're countering, or the acceptance if they're accepting. And if the buyer accepts the counter offer, so if you're counter offering, as soon as that buyer accepts is when your timelines start. And you'll have the buyer's agent obtain those signatures, of course. Again, then we're going back into play. So the buyer then has the option to accept, reject, or counter. And so you never want to make assumptions, even if you've had that conversation with the buyer's agent up front. And then once all parties have signed the contract, you'll save that in your files and collect, and that'll set earnest money timelines and everything like that. And as the listing agent, most of the time the buyer is depositing earnest money directly. Or the buyer's agent is taking care of that. And so on the seller side, I will typically do, again, I like to use those templates. I'll have the discussion with my sellers, and I'll let them know what the timelines are so that they kind of know the stress points. I'll let them know if it's occupied, that the buyer will likely have an inspection. It could take anywhere from 3 hours to all day, depending on the inspector. And they will want to make plans to be away from the house during that process. The other visit will be the appraisal, but that typically will happen after the inspection. And then of course, if it's a vacant property, they don't tend to be as worried about that, but it is something that they'll be thinking about until it happens. So you want to be aware of it. And then the other script they have in here is presenting a counter offer to the buyer's agent. Does someone want to read that?
Oh, go ahead. Although if you hear my cat meowing in the background, I apologize. We do feed her. She just acts like we don't.
Well, it's after lunch, dinner. So
Her dinner can comes at 5, so. But she wants treats. Anyway, we all want treats. Good morning, Mr. Smith. This is Zoe with Keller Williams Realty. Thank you for your offer. We really appreciate it. It was quite a bit lower than what the seller had hoped. The sellers have come back with a reasonable counter offer that should work. The seller is countering back for $5 million. The rest of the terms in your offer are fine, except for we really want the refrigerator. This is something that will work for everybody. Your buyer is getting a home within the market and the seller is selling at a reasonable price, and we can all move forward to get this closed. Wouldn't you agree?
yep, let's make it happen. Yeah, so of course that conversation can go a lot of different directions. Oftentimes I do find, especially if it's a multiple offer situation or just if you want to get things wrapped up pretty quickly, if your clients are pretty firm, you might test that out. Or if you don't know, if you're increasing the sales price by a significant amount, you might call and just say, hey, can your buyer do this? Will that work with their pre-approval? I might ask the lender to say, hey, do they have any flexibility here? It looks like we're probably going to counter. Or you might ask the buyer's agent that. But either way, just kind of having that little dialogue can make a hard counter offer come across better. All right, and then working the offer. So this recommends breaking into groups of 2. I'm not going to make you guys do that to present the offer back and forth, but I do encourage you to find a buddy to practice with and actually have done that before you submit your first offer. All right. So setting the stage for positive negotiation. Whether you represent the buyer or the seller, the goal is the same: to kick off the negotiation process with a positive, efficient, and ultimately leads to win-win agreements, which of course is within our mission at KW and hopefully your mission as an independent agent. So accepting, ideally, if the listing and offer price are right, the seller will accept the buyer's initial offer and move directly into contract to close, bypassing any negotiations on offer price. Rejecting, it's also possible that the seller immediately rejects the buyer's initial offer. Perhaps they received and decided to accept a more attractive offer, or the offer was simply too low. In this case, the buyer's agent should press forward to see if no really means no. I would say on the other side, if you lost at convincing your seller to counter and all other terms of the offer were good aside from price, you might revisit that conversation with the buyer's agent to say, hey, my seller was a little offended by the price. I don't think it has anything to do with your buyer. If they were to represent at a more competitive offer, you might have better luck. And you might be surprised that they might do it. Counter, however, the most common response in an initially low offer is for the seller to make a counter offer. This is a sign that the seller is interested in the buyer's offer and has extended an invitation to negotiate. While you cannot control or predict the actions or decisions of a client or agent on either side, you do have complete control over what you say and do in an effort to influence a positive negotiation process. And then of course you'll go into, I believe it's the next class where you go into more negotiations. And then maintaining a customer experience focus. So I've talked about this a lot in setting the expectation with your client from the beginning, and that consultation is really going to help make your experience with your customer top notch. So recognizing that customers come first is one of the things that KW really prides itself in. It's one of our 9 core beliefs. I think that's missing one now. And is part of the belief system and one of the reasons why we love being with Keller Williams. placing a strong emphasis on setting a foundation for win-win negotiation and subsequent closings. The goal is for every customer who does business with you to have a positive experience so that hopefully they'll want to do more business with you in the future and send you referrals. And it just makes being a real estate agent more fun if everyone's happy. One of the most important fundamentals in business, as well as one's personal life, is the decision to not only make commitments but keep them. And like we talked about with that communication with the offer process, communication goes a long way in helping navigate a bumpy road if you get into transaction and something doesn't go the way you expect it to go. So putting it all together, your action plan, preparing for your next class, recalling and remembering. I think this is all just kind of the recap to get you ready for your next class. You guys know what your daily actions are that you're supposed to be doing. I encourage you to do them. You'd be amazed at what, just like 15 minutes of the script practice that we did earlier, the call practice that we did. Every minute you focus on your business will pay in the long run. So any ahas or questions lingering about the content that we went over so far? Or I should say in today's class, because we are done. All right, well, you all have been amazing to learn with today. And every class that I teach, I learn something new. And it's so good to see all your faces on Zoom. And I look forward to when we can meet in person, hopefully soon. And I am so excited for you all to continue your journeys as agents. And I know you'll do a great job. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat box here. And if you guys have any other questions or if you need anything, please consider me someone that you can reach out to. I think I got that right. I got the phone number right for sure. It's good. Yeah. All right, we'll get.
Thanks again.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.